What is ethical fading? In this video, Simon Sinek talks about when businesses just prioritize immediate profits, immoral behavior becomes the standard.
So ethical fading is a really amazing and fascinating social phenomenon. Basically what it is when a group of people make unethical decisions believing that they are still consistent with their own ethical framework. In other words, they don't think they've done anything unethical, right? Extreme examples of this would be things like a pharmaceutical company raising the price of an essential drug 500%, 800%, 1,000%, 5,000%. And though it may not be illegal, it's highly, highly unethical, and yet they don't think they've done anything wrong. That's an extreme example, but we see ethical fading happen all across companies all the time, where we do things that we know are good for us, where we might lie to our customers or our clients, for example, or we might lie to each other to get ourselves ahead. You know, these are all demonstrations of ethical fading. The way in which ethical fading happens, as you said, one of the ways is just a ridiculous, unbalanced amount of pressure on short term, which forces us to think about ourselves or only think about that short-term goal. And then we can rationalize. Well, everyone's doing it. It's what the company wants me to do. How else am I going to get ahead? I have to put food on the table. It's the system. It's, like we can rationalize the behavior. Also the slippery slope. We do something a little bit once, it worked. We do it a little more, it works. We do it a little more, it works. And before you know it, you have full-blown ethical fading. And so the way you combat ethical fading, and like I said, I gave you an extreme example of the pharmaceuticals, but we see low-level ethical fading across a lot of companies, unfortunately. And the way you combat it is one, good leadership, where that kind of thing is not tolerated. So for example, it's totally normal for people to have unethical ideas. But the question is, when do they get caught? So in an unhealthy company, that unethical idea is implemented until social pressure or the law intervenes, or there's a scandal, right? And then we say, oh, we're terribly sorry. We're a very good company after you got caught. In a properly ethical company, somebody may raise the idea in a meeting, and everybody in the meeting will go, that's funny, but we would never do that here. That's not us. That's a little bit unethical. And it gets shut down immediately. And again, that's good leadership, because it's the leaders who are promoting people who are ethical, who are highlighting ethical behavior and acting in a way that sets the tone, and they're not putting undue pressure on people to break the rules in order to make the numbers. A lot of leaders, unfortunately, when confronted with toxicity or unethical behavior, they'll shrug their shoulders and say, I know, but the numbers are so good, and they allow it to happen. And so one of the primary ways in which you beat ethical fading, quite frankly, is good leadership. But the others are just cause, trusting teams. All of these things contribute to operating in a highly ethical way.
The idea of ethical fading highlights how people frequently overlook ethical factors when making decisions. This can happen when people prioritize other concerns above ethics in the face of difficult situations that call for balance and conflicting interest, such as personal gain versus social benefit. Ethical fading can happen when people, whether intentionally or inadvertently, fail to understand the moral ramifications of their conduct owing to a lack of knowledge or instruction on ethical concepts. Because ethical fading can happen unconsciously and frequently without people being aware of it, it presents one of the biggest issues. This might result in situations where people act unethically without realizing it, or where they are preoccupied with other concerns and neglect to think about the ethical ramifications of their choices. The Enron crisis is one instance of ethical deterioration in action. Before declaring bankruptcy in 2001, the corporation was among the biggest energy companies in the world. The scandal involved the business leaders falsifying accounting records and financial statements in order to conceal billions of dollars in debt and boost their profits. As a result, thousands of workers lost their jobs and investors lost billions of dollars. The executives of Enron acted unethically, although they did not at first understand the moral ramifications of their acts. They failed to take into account the ethical ramifications of their activities because they were too preoccupied with maintaining the illusion of success and increasing revenues. This kind of ethical fading can happen in any business or person that puts other considerations before of ethics. It is not specific to Enron. The Volkswagen emissions crisis is another illustration of ethical deterioration. In 2015, it was learned that the manufacturer had put software in its diesel cars that could tell when the car were undergoing emissions testing and change their performance to conform to the rules. However, while driving normally, the cars released up to 40 times the amount of pollutants that were permitted under US law. The affair sparked a widespread uproar, and Volkswagen was hit with massive fines and reputational damage. The executives who made the choice to install the software probably were not immediately aware of the ethical repercussions of their choices. They were concerned with retaining the performance of their automobiles while also meeting pollution regulations, but in doing so they acted unethically, which ultimately had a negative impact on the environment and people's health. People and organizations need to give ethical considerations priority in their decision-making processes to prevent ethical fading. This calls for a thorough understanding of ethical values like honesty, fairness, and accountability, as well as a dedication to upholding these standards at all times. By establishing ethical rules, offering training on ethical concepts and decision-making, and developing a reporting system for unethical activity, organizations can also take measures to develop a culture of ethics. People are more likely to identify and emphasize ethical factors in decision-making processes if an atmosphere that values ethics is fostered. In conclusion, ethical fading is a major problem for people and organizations who put other things above ethics. It can happen unintentionally, which can result in circumstances where people act unethically without understanding it. Individuals and organizations must give ethical issues top priority in their decision-making processes and establish an ethical culture that places a high value on honesty, fairness, and accountability in order to prevent ethical fading. By doing this, people make sure that their decisions reflect their moral principles and ultimately help to create a better society. When businesses just prioritize immediate profits, immoral behavior becomes the standard. To stop the spread of ethical fading in our organizations, we need effective leadership. Hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. For more videos, like these and please subscribe.